here we are with Mark Jagger with the fabulous Starboard Quest series, and you brought your other two books here. I'm gonna put that one down. So we have these two, and you said you don't even have, you have to order copies. You don't even have copies of yours for yourself.
Yeah, you got to get them through Amazon.
Yeah.
Or through other major booksellers.
We'll go ahead and post those links below, like I did on the other video. But yeah, I talked to Selena the other night, and that was a lot of fun. But
you looked like you were having some interesting discussions there.
Yeah, even before.
That's good.
We had a lot of really good, interesting discussions before and after. But yeah, so I guess kind of maybe tell people a little bit about yourself and how you came up with this book series. One of a few, I'm assuming.
Well, I'm Mark Jagger, and I write the Mystic Michigan series books, but I also write the Starboard Quest series books now. And the Starboard Quest is just something I've always been interested in right from the very beginning. I've had a fascination with frequency, sound, and vibration for years and years. So it's just kind of something that has been coming together over long, extended periods of time. And now I've just kind of condensed it into some ideas. And hopefully I've got, material come together for part 4 as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, it's an ongoing thing.
Absolutely, and I think as people are expanding their awareness of what's going on and how important it is, it's not just, I think, personal opinion, that this is something that is the beginning, always will be the beginning, and will be the continuation of where, who, and what we are. So this is like not even close to scratching the surface of what frequency, sound, and vibration is and what it means.
Yeah, it's just basically giving an introduction to it and giving an introduction to some of the ideas that some of the different philosophers and sages have had for years. It goes so deep.
Yeah, and a lot of it has been not even necessarily buried, but it's almost like people just don't talk about it anymore. I mean, just think about what it was like, who gets a philosophy degree? You would just get poo-pooed, right? It's like you can't do anything with a philosophy degree.
And yet a lot of our whole entire civilization is based on the foundations that were set up by Greek philosophers, Roman, people from all of these different cultures. There's even Oriental philosophies and ideas that have made their way into the West. So, it's kind of interesting how a lot of the whole main, like I say, foundations of our society were set up by people that people today couldn't even tell you these people's names.
Mm-hmm.
We enjoy cooking food in the microwave ovens that people in the past came up with, or driving our cars down the highway systems that have been developed, or enjoying all the different technologies, but most of us don't even know most of the people that these ideas even came from. Because I think that in a certain way we like to think that we're more intelligent than people from the past.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how far back you go in the past.
That's true.
I thought the really interesting part about, and this was pointing out about the glass harmonica. I don't know why I kind of got fixated on that. I remember seeing that, just pictures of it from somewhere. It may have been like on a PBS station or something where they showed someone playing it, probably around the holidays. And I think it's absolutely fascinating because didn't you point out that, who was it that came up with the drawing?
Well, Plato originally had an idea that, I guess you could probably show them the picture right out of the book there. I believe it's right in one of the front stories.
Mm-hmm.
And he came up with this idea that the planets of our solar system, and actually they viewed the moon and the sun as actual orbs too. Well, that's not actually, that's the
harmonica.
But the one that, the conceptual instrument that Plato came up with, like on the edges, the outer edges of those glass bowls, he's seen that there was a planet, like the outer rims of the bowls were the planetary orbits of the orbs, and they were going around the big, circumferences of these bowls, And if you ran your finger around the rim of a wine glass and heard the tone that it makes, you get the idea. He believed that each of these planets were going around these edges of these bowls, and they were each making a sound as they would orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of had an idea similar to Pythagoras, I believe.
Okay.
So, there's just a lot of different ideas that they had that we've kind of lost in history, but they're really neat ideas.
Right, and I think that they have sent probes out into space and have tried to capture some of those sounds, but I don't know how much of that is getting interference from just the movement and the device itself that might be doing the recording.
Well, they're not really recording sound like the Voyager is out there right now.
Yeah.
And it's recording impressions from plasma waves,
Okay.
and then converting those recordings of the movements of plasma waves over into audible sounds that you can hear. And you can go online, and NASA has these all online for people to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them are very eerie sounding.
Yeah, I know. Our friend Omar, Watchers Talk, had put the one out there for Saturn. He has no affection for Saturn, so he did a big series on it. Yeah, so that's why I was kind of interested to know how that all kind of worked. So
And then you were mentioning Ben Franklin and the actual glass harmonica. That was, of course, invented hundreds of years or thousands after Plato had originally had this idea. I don't know if Ben Franklin got the idea from Plato, but it seems like I have heard these things playing, and they are a really interesting sounding instrument.
Yeah, they're absolutely phenomenally, I don't know, almost angelic, I think, the way they sound. There's just something about it.
They're an eerie sounding. I'm not calling angelic sounds eerie, but like you say, it's got that.
It draws you in.
Yes, it's interesting. You wonder why more instruments aren't used like this in modern music. Modern music seems very limited in the fact that for probably 6 or 7 decades now, the primary instruments that have been used are guitars.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a rhythm, a lead, a bass, and piano, which is another stringed instrument, basically. Mm-hmm. There are more incorporated, and there have been in the past big band and all that, but it really is surprising that for a lot of the main core of a lot of the different entertainers that are out there, they're mostly or primarily guitar bands.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what the reason for that is. I wonder why, with all the capabilities that we have now, they don't expand more into hundreds of different types of instruments.
Not sure on that one. Interesting question. My mind immediately goes to money. It's a cost thing. And I think that people aren't really. Deb's going down the dark hall. I think people are kind of not really subdued, but more like suppressed for creativity. I think people are too much trying to survive, and I think creativity is kind of getting squished and squashed, and you're more worried about how you're going to pay your rent or get food on the table. So I think a lot of the creativity kind of goes down.
How do you see that? Do you see that as a natural consequence of? Now I'm interviewing you. Do you see that as a natural consequence of our society, or do you see? I know that you have a bit of a conspiracy mindset, correct? Or people who do.
I'm very open to whatever anybody's got to say on it.
Well, there are certain people that believe that the main frequency that's used for tuning was changed by a guy in the, I believe it was the 1920s or something like that, or 1950s.
I think it was earlier than that. I thought I had heard it was it Goebbels, part of the Nazi regime?
Yeah. I had read that. I really don't know about all that, but I do find that the things that they say are interesting. I didn't really write a whole lot about that, the whole conspiracy part of it. Mine's more just going into what the ancient philosophers said and what different scientists have discovered about sound.
Right, and I
So,
think one of the things that we kind of I have really struggled to get through the book because I had more it raised more questions for me than anything. So I think I got through like the first maybe 50, 60 pages, and I had to start lightening up because I had had the book for a while, and I wanted to get through it. I ended up buying just a keyboard, just a regular electronic keyboard, and just to kind of get my head back going into that direction. Um, but how do you feel or believe that that difference with changing? Because I think people are under the misconception that it was at 432 before, and that they switched it to 440. I don't think that that's the case. I think it was something that people just kind of did whatever was convenient for their particular area. Is that accurate or?
well, the it's called Pythagorean tuning because of the mathematics it's based on some of Pythagoras' ideas. But I know that there's a group called the Sufis. Have you ever heard of the Sufis?
Mm-hmm.
They call the 432 hertz tone Saja, which means the father of all other frequencies. So they seen, way back then, they had already seen that tone was very important to them. And there's indications around the world, according to some researchers, that they find old instruments and they were designed to be played at 432 hertz tuning. Um, how much truth there is to that, I haven't examined that myself. I'm just kind of relating what other researchers have said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's just kind of interesting that people do have that tendency to go, ha, conspiracy. I think that it kind of feeds that side of people.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to do that, you really need quite a bit more proof than what a lot of people are willing to
Exactly.
offer or
Check
look
your
into.
research. Do your own research. And when you do your research, check research the one you're researching. You know what I mean? I mean, when I was getting my degree in psychology, we were doing our papers, they were trying to say, well, what peer reviewed articles, right? They want you to say, okay, is it good or is it bad? And I said, well, it's good to a certain degree because you have people that with experience and they have a better understanding of maybe the issues, problems, or things that you're talking about, and they have a little more hopefully educated perspective on what you're trying to present. However, considering the percentage of the articles that are peer reviewed is minuscule. I mean, you might have thousands and thousands and thousands of articles that are passed by because there's a little bit of this going on, and your article's not going to get reviewed because of that political standing of whoever is going to review it. And that kind of I think is a little on the shady. And the ones that do, if you look at the research that those researchers are using, a lot of times, even though it would be something that had been done, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you look at what they used, and you look at what they used, and you could be looking at data, both metadata and just the local, and it's old. And your perspectives change, how you conducted your research changed, even in the last 5 to 7 years, it's changed. So how credible is that? So I said, that's what I didn't like about peer reviewed. They didn't like me.
As far as the 432 hertz tone, there are some pretty neat videos that you can watch as far as them running actual cymatics instruments and comparing, notes from the 432 hertz scale with notes from the 440 scale through a cymatics instrument. And the ones run through the 432 hertz tone do seem to be much more defined and to greater levels of perfection than the ones ran through the 440 scale tones. So
So
that was interesting.
how do you measure perfection? What does that mean?
Well, with some of the geometric shapes that were on the cymatics instruments of the 440 hertz, they were kind of a little bit more sloppy and a little less defined, and the ones that, at least if they were presenting online, were more defined and sharp and just kind of seemed like they were making the patterns, the cymatics patterns, more clearly
Okay.
and more defined.
Okay. Well, that makes
So I
sense.
thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that
And then
is.
the math, like they say there's something to the math, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I kind of like that number just for the arithmetic of it and the math of it. It seems
9.
to fit in better with the universe and everything. Like for
Yeah.
instance, the moon is 2,160 miles wide, they believe.
Mm-hmm.
Which if you multiply that by 5, it's uh, it's in the 432 range, right? As
Okay.
far as like in the math. If you take the sun, it's 864,000 miles wide, which is 432,000 times 2 is the and they run these things, and the math that they discover that the 432 is involved with are really really interesting. And I don't know if you're familiar with Joseph Campbell at all. Some people might have heard of him. He's written some on the 432, the number 432, and its importance in ancient history to ancient man. So the math of it's pretty cool.
So how does this all come? How did you all come to find the interest in this? What was the impetus for this?
I've had an interest in this type of thing for years, for decades, like I was telling you earlier. Um, and at some point, I had written a lot of different stuff down on notebooks and stuff over time, and I thought, all this can kind of come together and into one big cohesive thing, and it should be pretty interesting. Um, but I do see some problems with a lot of the modern music and some of the stuff that's going on with it. That I thought, well, you know what? If people don't know about some of these different things, um, they're never going to change or have the opportunity to change or try to make things better. I kind of think that in a way things are just kind of in a rut, and they have been for like quite a long time. It's like it's time to, the universe is constantly expanding, and our minds should constantly be expanding in regards to not just music, but just about every type of study. Psychology, like you say, things change every 5 to 7 years or whatever, right? Well, if you look at a lot of what's going on, like especially in popular music, not much has changed for decades.
Mm-hmm.
A music scale is always ascending, right? To the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. The whole nature of music is to ascend, right? And in some regards, you don't see it ascending like it should be, in my opinion. It should always be reaching new levels, or there it is to a certain extent, but maybe kind of like in limited spheres of people with limited interest. There's like real niche audiences for stuff like that, but as far as like the general population are all kind of just listening to some of the same types of stuff that they've listened to for a lot of years. And you would ask yourself, when is this going to change? I
Mm.
can feel, it seems like I can feel that it's time for a change,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
So you referenced like about the instruments and why people haven't um, done anything with making more instruments or different instruments. And then now bringing up the whole music and the bands, and typically they only have like guitars and drums, and that was all kind of like really nothing really has changed. You can go back,
And
50,
there's always
60
going to be
years.
exceptions to the rule. There's always going to be some people that have used uh, more instruments and different kinds. Some of them do use some orchestration and borrow from the ideas of people like Bach and Beethoven. You do see some of that mixed in too, but I'm talking about your general run of the mill, long term acts and entertainers that have been out there as far as like the pop culture. I know there's a whole um, niche of people that are into orchestra and a whole niche of people that are in opera and things like that. And yeah, there's some differences there, but it doesn't seem like they have near the audiences as like these different acts that can fill stadiums and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't. I'm sure there are some of them too, but just there's not as many,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't seem like
And I think what's
it's.
interesting though too, if you look at the structure of some of the music that they have that's more contemporary, for me, it's like the loop is very short. And if you look at some of the older, you my taste in music is very eclectic. I can pretty much pass on most rap. I'll get that one. But I mean, I like opera. I would go to an opera. I would love to go to a traditional Italian opera. Uh, that I think is far more interesting. You're not going to find those repetitive loops like you do in the contemporary music. Do you think that? Why do you think that would is? I mean, these pieces that have been written so long ago, and now the contemporary is looped and has more popularity than the one that should be more interesting.
Well, I have this one thing written in one of the books, and I believe it might be in the Harmonic Battle of Evermore. All right. Now, this might not be an answer, but this just triggered this thought, so we'll just go with it.
Oh, I'm triggering them.
Well, I have this whole idea that I have written in the books about the music down here kind of being a microcosm, a lot of it being microcosms of a greater reality. And there's even a section where some of the earthly instruments that we have down here on Earth are kind of like a microcosm of greater realities of outer space. For example, and I mean, I'll get to the opera here in a minute, but like even a standard sized piano, if you have a regular sized piano, there's 88 keys on it, right? And the number of black keys corresponds to the number of northern constellations there are, and the number of white keys corresponds to the southern uh, constellations.
All these evokers, how cool is that? I'm
the
sorry,
same amount
Mark.
of things.
That's just amazing.
And they, in the ancient times, they even seen the human body as a musical instrument. They seen the spine as like the fretboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the nerve strands that ran down the spine as being strings of the instrument. And there was a guy. It looks like his name should be pronounced Jacob Boehme, but a lot of people call him Jaco Burma, and he was from the 1400s, early 1500s, I believe it was, and he seen human beings as musical instruments that were being played by either a good or a bad spirit. And so the whatever your life was kind of radiating, he claimed that he could talk to people for a few minutes and kind of know what type of instrument they were and what kind of a being they were being played as, whether they were a harmonious person or they were a person bringing dissonance into society. And he had this whole expanded idea of harmony. So now getting to we're talking about macrocosms and microcosms, right? Now getting back to the idea of an opera, what you have is a conductor of the opera standing up on a podium a lot of the time, right? And moving things around and directing all of the different areas of the orchestra, right? Well, in the Renaissance time, they had the master conductor of the entire symphony up on a podium higher than all the universe itself, and all the stars were being directed. All of the angelic beings were being directed by the cosmic conductor of the universal symphony, and right on down to all the different levels, the planets, the people, and everything. Well, so the idea was each person was born under a sign of the zodiac, a different sign, right? And people have always had this belief that um, the way that a person's life plays out has to do with what sign they were born under. So they seen this whole idea, this whole cosmic orchestra going on. Everything was in harmony or whatever, and then the sign of the zodiac that the people were born under and the actions that they took due to being under this influence of this sign was the dance they were doing. So the universe spinning around and all of these things going on was the symphony playing, and then men's and women's actions on the earth were the dance they were doing to this cosmic tune.
Okay.
So now with the opera, then that would almost be like a microcosm, a small scale model of this whole idea that they had in the Renaissance and other times of there being like a whole greater, this happening at a whole greater level. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so each one of those persons, the bodies and the nervous system, and you're talking about the frequency and the sound and the hertz involved. And even each one of the organs, the skin tissues, the organ tissues, everything has a different resonance, and it has to resonate within a certain frequency to be considered or to function in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Well, now you're sounding to me like Paracelsus. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but he was like a physician way back in the, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago it was, but he actually um, seen he would do such things as he would put glasses of water out at night when certain constellations were shining down to try to absorb some of the rays into the water because he believed that there was such a connection of the human body to the stellar orbs up there that when people were sick, they were actually lacking some of the cosmic rays.
Okay.
And there are cosmic rays being bombarding this earth right now, and if they weren't coming through this room right now where we're sitting and doing their job, we would not live. It's from what I've heard. So it's all very interesting, you know.
And two, I think what we see is obviously limited by our avatar, so we don't see a full spectrum of light. We might see something as, this white light or the light from the bulbs or the sun or whatever. So you know what it's just smiling. You know I'm trying to lead up to the color, right?
Yeah. Well, see, Sir Isaac Newton, he was one of the first ones. He was the one that was studying, and he had a prism, a three-cornered prism, and he noticed that when you shine white light through a three-cornered prism, 7 colors will come out of are contained within white light, right? And he took every color of the rainbow and correlated a music note to it. There's a graph on it right there. And then the Greeks, I don't know if he got that idea from the Greeks, because the Greeks actually had 7 different music modes, right?
Right.
The Dorian and all of them. And they correlated, a music mode with a different constellation of the zodiac. So they believed, and Plato had this belief that souls would come down and they'd come under the influence of all of these different planets, and that was like kind of them coming under the influence of the stellar music. Then they'd come down here to the earth and they would dance out their lives and the movements of their lives to whatever signs they were born under. I thought that was a kind of a unique and interesting way of looking at things.
But even with the color, though, and my mother was a little out there, I think, for some of the things. Yes.
Yeah. I get it.
Right. But my mom, I remember, my sister had done stained glass, so she took a square of red stained glass, and we had a little. It was all windows up to about where you could sit, and it was all windows up, 2 sides, and it faced south and west. And my mom, it was later in the day, and she took that stained glass, she stuck it in that window, she went over to the kitchen sink, got a glass of water, and stuck that glass right there, and I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "Well, I didn't have any red food today."
Oh, your mother did that.
My mother did that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was back in the late 70s.
Well, you see, I've been having some compositions designed and Pythagorean tuning and all doing special things with the timings and all of these different things. But part of the compositions that we've been designing will eventually have something to do with color. So we've got these chromotherapy spectacles.
I told him he should have worn them from the beginning, and everybody would have thought how cool he was.
Yeah. Well, these aren't sunglasses. But these are chromotherapy spectacles, and these are like an aqua color, I believe. What do they look like to you?
Teal.
Okay, so a teal color. Yeah. And each color, the light passes through, it goes into the retina, and each color is supposed to have an effect on different things in your body. Kind of like mood rings almost, but like with light. And there are certain types of light that they actually use in hospitals. Like if a baby's jaundice, they'll put them under blue light.
Yep.
And there's even, I think, stuff called red light therapy and different things. So I think that there's just a lot to be learned about all of the different spectrums of light and how they can affect us positively.
Yeah.
And then the idea then would be to pair different frequencies of color with different sounds and even different scents and uh, flavors, everything. Have a type of composition that puts all of these things together so you have a music that's not just speaking to uh, your auditory part of you, but all of the five senses.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I know the doctors are now just starting to really start. Well, mine did probably about 10 or 15 years ago. Say that uh, go get an infrared sauna, not the cheap ones, but the real deal, because it does penetrate down below into your skin, and it's very very healthy. Not those hot. I mean, you can if you want the Swedish ones. I think we're in a sauna right now, actually. Right?
It feels like it.
Yeah.
But, you know,